Thank you, Representative McCarter. I think just to go back to what Representative Pashinsky raised, because you really focused on the Prevailing Wage Act and the school districts would know what the Prevailing Wage Act was. But the question was pointing to the bidder, not the school districts. So what was being raised was how would the CoStar's bidder know when they're involved in the program? How do they know when this is being determined project to project by the Prevailing Wage Board, and when it's different areas of the state and they're in these when they're involved in the large contract list, that how do they know how to bid the correct prevailing wage when it's varying project to project without more specifics? And then how does a school district determine that the bidder is actually withholding what they should and not treating the contractors as independent contractors, and they're complying with the other sections of the law like we'd imposed to ensure that E-Verify is being used and such, so that they're not employing illegal aliens on some of these as subcontractors and not doing the proper withholding. So I think the questions were more focused on what the points he was raising was related to the bidder, not the school district, as was being discussed by Representative Pashinsky.
Sure. But the school district, as the buyer, is communicating their requirements, presumably, to the bidders. And those bidders, if they want to be able to do business with public entities in Pennsylvania, and they're providing services that fall under the definition of construction, need to make it their business to know what the prevailing wage requirements are and where to find them. They're not that hard to find. They're right there on the Department of Labor's website. So I understand the concern that the rule the rule we rescinded was sort of ironclad, right? Like there wasn't much gray in the rule that we rescinded, and we have on some level allowed for a little more gray, but we believe that it's worthwhile. So
as the program was originally designed for you to have large contracts where people could go in and make large purchases, whether it was traffic lights or whatever else.
Yes.
Now when you start getting into the labor issue, I mean, for personally, when I look at, like, you have vendors that are making offerings to local governments or school districts for various supplies that they need. And it's pretty straightforward. You want a traffic light, here's the vendors that can get you a traffic light, here's the cost that they can offer it at, because they're going to have a larger volume of businesses being part of the CoStar's program. Mm-hmm. But when you start talking about labor for a specific project like that, and that's, I think, where the problem comes from. If the labor is more specific in the details that you need to have actually have a bid. So if I can go into, and I don't know how it works because I've never used it, never been part of it. Sure. But if from just on the surface, if I'm looking to purchase 10 traffic lights, I go in and find out who's selling those traffic lights and how much are they selling them for, and they can give me that information pretty quickly without a lot of specifics, because they're leveraging that sale across the whole state to many government entities that access the program. But now I need this AstroTurf laid on this field with these specific details in this specific area of the state with a specific prevailing wage and so on. So it wouldn't be something that I would think at first glance that's going to be something that large volumes are being offered discounts for, because everything's going to be area specific and region specific.
I agree with you with what you're saying. An example that comes to mind, though, is road salt, for example.
And that's a product that's pretty easily to say, hey, I need 10 tons or I need 100 tons of road salt.
It is, Mr. Chairman, but as it turns out, the cost of the transportation for that road salt is such a sizable portion of the total cost that it matters a great deal where you're having it delivered. So our road salt providers, when they respond to these bids, need to know what the demand is at each location around the state in order to work up a unique price for each location, which is why we have the variance that we do from community to community in terms of their road salt prices, even on the contract. It's not one fixed price per ton, because it's a lot harder to get the road salt to certain parts of the state than it is to get it to other parts of the state. And I believe that the situation with prevailing wage is exactly analogous to that. If you're going to provide installation services associated with installing playground equipment or what have you, and you're going to provide them in different parts of the state, then I think then as the supplier, it's incumbent upon you to know, to know what the or what your actual costs are going to look like in order to deliver that service in those different parts of the state. I think this is pretty.
But you still don't have the prevailing wage board involved with project-to-project determinations. I mean, I'm sure it's a good example, but I don't think it's a direct parallel to what we're talking about. But that's fine.
Sure.
But I appreciate it. We do have one. Representative Irvin has. I probably created something by continuing. We could have probably been done, so I apologize for that.
It's quite all
Keeping
right.
you here
It's quite all
longer.
right. I'm here as long as you need me.